Hey Earthers, Nikki here, and I can't believe it. Over a year I've been reading The Expanse, and I have just finished book 9, Leviathan Falls. I started this back in the early days of iWizard, so you can see the evolution of the videos as you watch these reviews. But before I get into my thoughts of Leviathan Falls, I just need to vent about the cover layout a little bit. Orbit books. Really, the spine is yellow. It's yellow again. Okay, this is the third yellow spine in the series. I mean, there's so many colors out there. Why do we have 3 of the same colors? And I know that if you lay out all the book covers with the novellas and short stories included, we have a nice range. But the novellas and short stories are digital. I don't have them on my shelf. Like, we could have done so many different options could have looked good here, like a nice protomolecule blue, a really cool kind of sci-fi electric purple, or even a BFE green. And if you've read this, you know what the BFE is. So stay tuned. Welcome back, and this right here is your one and only spoiler warning. There are spoilers, some serious spoilers in here for books 1 through 8. If you haven't read them yet and you don't want to find out what happens, stop right now. No spoilers for Leviathan Falls though. And, God. As these books have been coming to an end, I just have been getting like more and more and more emotional with reading them, and the dedication right when I opened this book seriously got me. The dedication is 9 books later and you're still here, so this one's for you. Aw, like really? Aw, James S.A. Corey. And Leviathan Falls was published in 2021, so 10 years after Leviathan Wakes in 2011. 10 years! And there's 9 novels and a bunch of novellas and the TV series. And how were Ty Frank and Daniel Abraham so productive? It's absolutely unbelievable, this feat. And I realized that when I reviewed Leviathan Wakes, it was my only review in which I didn't try to dive into the mythology of Leviathan. So let's do it here since Leviathan falls in this one. Leviathan comes from the Hebrew Bible, and it's a sea serpent. And it's featured in a bunch of stories, including the book of Amos. So now I'm wondering, like, is that where Amos got his name? Also, the word Leviathan, the Hebrew root, comes from coiled or twisted. So some of the stories Leviathan is featured in, I guess, parallel Tiamat. And both are an embodiment of chaos, and Leviathan specifically is an embodiment that's threatening to eat the damned or consume the damned. So that's definitely something important to keep in mind. Of course then, since Leviathan's featured in the Hebrew Bible, it's also found in the Old Testament. So this is from the Old Testament, Psalm 104. There is the sea, vast and spacious, teeming with creatures beyond number, living things both large and small. There the ships go to and fro, and Leviathan, which you formed to frolic there. So essentially the Leviathan encapsulates the space of the material world and is extremely powerful. And of course, in the case of the Expanse, it refers to the protomolecule. Bioengineered by the architects, an ancient Nidaria-like hive-minded species, the protomolecule was designed to use the resources available to it to achieve the architect's goal of rebooting the ring gates and destroying their extra-dimensional enemy. The protomolecule lay dormant on the moon Phoebe for eons until humans got their hands on it. It infected everyone on Arrow's station, turning them into vomit zombies. and then into a spaceship that Julie Mao piloted and Miller co-piloted into Venus, where it metamorphosed into a carbon silicate jellyfish and swung 2 AU beyond Uranus's orbit, forming the ring that became known as Soul Gate. Holden, aided by investigator Miller, brought the ring network back online, giving humanity access to more than 1,300 habitable worlds. As more and more ships traverse the ring gates, some start to disappear, devoured by a mysterious extra-dimensional entity, the Dark Gods, that destroyed the architects. High Consul Duarte of Laconia, de facto ruler, dictator of humanity, struck back at the Dark Gods, unleashing Tiamat's wrath and starting a war with an invisible enemy who could alter the nature of space-time, trapping Duarte in a catatonic state and threatening to wipe out all of humanity in the blink of an eye. Leviathan Falls begins with High Consul Duarte waking back up from his catatonic state, and then just piecing out of Laconia, totally disappearing. And so that brings me to our big, newest POV character, and Aliana Tanaka has 10 chapters devoted to her. She is tasked by Admiral Trejo to go hunt down Duarte and bring him back to Laconia. So basically she's given this Omega status where she has the Laconian keys to the city. Like, she has access to absolutely everything. Tanaka, I guess, fills that Martian Marine niche left behind by Bobby, and no one can replace Bobby. And Ty Frank and Daniel Abraham, the way that you send off your characters, just the image of Bobby in vacuum, in her armor, just in her blazing battle with, I think it was the Tempest. Like, seriously, what do you do to us readers? And as I said, Tanaka is certainly not Bobby. I mean, their similarities really begin and end with them being Martian Marines. And Tanaka was a Martian Marine who defected to Laconia. And she also has some serious internal issues. She's a bit of an adrenaline junkie, and she enjoys taking sexual advantage of her subordinates, which is super bizarre. And she forces them to keep secrets. She likes to empower over them, and she kind of likes that little feeling that if it's ever found out that she's having these relationships with her subordinates, that she could be killed for it. She kind of gets off on that, and it's a little bit, like, very much weird. She's also, like, in her 60s, so, and she's, like, sleeping with, like, 20-year-olds. So that's kind of, there's an ick factor there, seriously. So despite her rock-hard exterior, Tanaka does have vulnerabilities and secrets. And one of the most important aspects of her character is that she does really value her privacy above all else. And really the most important thing to her is that she has her internal secrets that Laconia does not know about, that others do not know about. She also does have this really cool, like, Laconian stalker suit, like this fancy armor that she uses for tracking Duarte. So we do get some cool tech with her. It's like a pretty rad suit. And while tracking Duarte, her trail does eventually lead her off-world. So she leaves Laconia, she goes through the ring gates, and of course, eventually she does cross paths with the Rocinante. And yes, the crew is back aboard the Roci. So we do have that again. So I'm going to start with Holden. And the really strange thing about Holden in this book, well, we haven't had Holden's POV in a couple books now. And one of the big differences, as while his chapters used to be Holden chapters, he's not Holden anymore. He's Jim. Okay, his chapters are Jim chapters. And there's a reason for that, because Jim is a different character than Holden. Because as a prisoner, he was a prisoner for so long on Laconia, and he was tortured. So Jim is understandably suffering from PTSD from that. experience. And so while Holden was very much external and reactive, and I used to describe him as kind of shallow, which broke my heart because I wanted Holden to be deep. Well, Jim is not. Jim is deeper. He's quite different from Holden. He is more internal, and he is also obsessive. He's thinking about his heartbeat, and he's wondering if his blood pressure is up too high and whether he's going to have a stroke or a heart attack. So he's having panic attacks all the time. He's just so in his mind. But one positive for Jim now is that he's more observant and empathetic. He's actually thinking about other people on board the Roci and how they might feel and responding accordingly. So with him on board the Roci are Naomi, Alex, Amos, Teresa, and also Muskrat. Yes, we have a dog in space now. And so I was seriously so worried at the end of Tiamat's Wrath that there might be this scene. There was like the beginnings of this scene between Teresa and Muskrat, which were giving me like flashbacks to his Dark Materials, that scene between Lyra and Pentalemon that has like still haunts me to this day. It was like I think it's the most upsetting scene I have ever read in my entire life. And so I didn't want that to come back. So I'm just so happy Muskrat, Teresa's dog, is on the Roci. So before I talk a little bit more about the other characters, I just want to say that Jim chapter 39 was probably my favorite chapter in the entire series. I read it twice, and then I made Jordan listen to me read it out loud to him. And while I was like reading it out loud to him, I was getting like super like choked up. And let me just say, I could not keep it to myself. I had to share it with him because there's also, not only is it like a very well written chapter, but there's also a really important cameo in that chapter that I was so happy happened, but also really sad that it happened. And if you've read this, you will know why. So I absolutely I did love Jim's POV in this book, and I'm so happy that we got to return to him because we did spend so much time with Holden throughout the series. And then Naomi had a bit of a smaller role. She had 7 chapters. But she has a big role in like the plot overall because she's now the leader of the underground. So she's kind of like this Fred Johnson figure now, interestingly enough. And what she's trying to do is she's trying to communicate with the underground, but she has this unreliable communication system to work with because of the loss of Medina Station, which was like also such a hurtful loss in the last book. I mean, we have followed the evolution of Medina. I mean, from its origins as the Mormon generational ship to the behemoth to Medina Station. That was just another big loss. So there's a lot of those because this is a long series and we're at the end of it. So some other Roci POVs we got, in addition to Naomi, we got some Teresa and Alex chapters, much more minor in this book. And I really did like Teresa's POV in Tiamat's Wrath, but I do know that she did not have as big of a role in this book. So basically she's just on board the Roci, working with Amos, learning how to be a mechanic. And the thing is, Amos, some things happened to him last book too, and he was altered, let's just say altered, by the Laconian repair drones. And so one of the big questions that the crew's like constantly grappling with is he even still Amos? He has Amos's memories, but he also knows a lot of stuff about the architects. He has like this library of architect knowledge, and like, is he still him? And that's really a common theme in science fiction. And I love cyberpunk, and I've been on a cyberpunk spree with Jordan lately, and I watched Ghost in the Shell for the first time, both the 90s anime and the ScarJo version, and I actually really did like the ScarJo version. I liked them both. I thought they were absolutely gorgeous, but like the big question there is that if you have a human brain and your body is robotic, well, are you still a human? Can you still be a human? And I think it's kind of the same idea with Amos, since he has Amos's memories and he thinks he's Amos. Is he still Amos? And from some clues, I'm going to say that he's not quite Amos because his explicit language is seriously toned down. His potty mouth has been quite a bit cleaned out. So, I mean, there's that. So maybe he's changed a little. And lastly, with Alex learns that he's going to be a grandfather. And so he's back doing his Alex, once again going through his like internal guilt over not being present for his family. So that's kind of a common state for Alex. And another new POV we get is Kit, and Kit is Alex's son. And I thought the Kit chapters were fine. They served their purpose in showing how some of the war was playing out between Duarte and the Dark Gods and the effect it was having on people. But then when I went back to put this review together and I was counting chapters, I was like, wow, there were only 4 Kit chapters. It felt like so many more Kit chapters. And maybe that's saying something. Maybe I didn't love those chapters. I mean, they were okay. Elvi was once again another one of the bigger POV characters in Leviathan Falls. She had 7 chapters and she has a really important role in this book. I mean, she is the head of the Laconian Science Directorate and she's charged with saving humanity from the Dark Gods. So she's back on board the Falcon and she's hanging out in Adro system, studying the BFE. And BFE stands for Big Effin' Emerald. And this crystal is like the size of Jupiter. And essentially what the crystal is used for is it's a storage device. It's a storage device that the architects uploaded their histories and their knowledge onto this device. And the BFE just greatly upsets Fayez, a geologist after my own heart, because it's not even an emerald, okay? And that brings me to my science lesson of the day. So the BFE is actually a diamond. And I mean, diamonds and emeralds are not the same thing. They have a completely different chemical composition. Emeralds are part of the beryl family and they have this hexagonal crystal structure. So really because of that, that like really dictates the strength of different minerals. So it's like emeralds are like 2 orders of magnitude softer than diamonds are, okay? Diamond can definitely scratch an emerald. Diamonds, on the other hand, are pure carbon and have this strong tetrahedral structure, okay? So they are the hardest minerals there are, okay? So carbon, totally different, okay? The way that diamonds sometimes get their color is they might have a nitrogen impurity present that gives them a little bit of color. But in this case, we're dealing with a green diamond, and we do have green diamonds on Earth. I think the most famous green diamond is the Dresden green diamond, which was green because of its exposure to radioactive materials. And while we're on Fayez, I know I complained about him a little bit last book because, like, while I do like his personality and all, he was feeling really flat from Elvi's perspective. And so I was like, you know, like that was one why I kind of ticked off like half a point on characters. And in this book, we did actually get an entire POV chapter for Fayez. And Fayez is worried about his wife, Elvi, because she continues to fulfill her role of the enraptured scientist, so much so that she is like not exercising, she's wasting away, and she is just focused on conducting her experiments. She's absolutely obsessed. So what she's doing in experimentation is she's trying to get more information from the BFE. And so she's hooked up Kara to it so that Kara, if you remember, she and Zan come from the novella Strange Dogs. So if you haven't read Strange Dogs, I really recommend that you do because it is pretty important for the series as a whole. Like Amos, she has also been altered by those Laconian repair dogs. And so she is hooked up to the BFE, she's learning about the history of the architects. And then she tells Elvi about her experience afterward. And the really experimental chapters that we get from James S.A. Corey in this book are the interludes called The Dreamer, in which we dive into Kara's experience hooked up to the BFE. So it's kind of like those experimental interludes that we got in Sibylla Byrne, okay? Like those investigator chapters, which personally I liked, even though other people I think had problems with it. And I did enjoy the Dreamer chapters, and there was a poetic nature to them in which like I could probably reread them a bunch of times and like extract more meaning from it now that I finished the book. So here's my rating. For story, I rated it a 9 out of 10. So Ty Frank and Daniel Abraham clearly had a plan for the Expanse series from the get-go. Everything came together beautifully, and I did not ever feel like I was being jerked around. Every single book had its place, okay? We were always progressing the plot forward overall, okay, over the entire series. And the thing is, when I compare like how I felt reading Leviathan Falls to Tiamat's Wrath, there was an element missing. I felt like I was more gripped by Tiamat's Wrath than by Leviathan Falls. I was so sucked in to Tiamat's Wrath. But the thing is, I think it was more like the focus of Leviathan Falls was a little more abstract than Tiamat's Wrath. Tiamat's Wrath was more character focused, really, even though like the Expanse is always kind of character focused. I felt like the characters were kind of the central figures in Tiamat's Wrath, while in Leviathan Falls, we were just trying to wrap everything up and we were using whichever character was most convenient to move the plot along, which is fine. It absolutely worked. And the thing is, though, I loved the ending of Leviathan Falls. I thought it was perfect. It was such a satisfying end to the series. I don't think they could have done it better. There was one maybe tweak to one of the final perspectives that we got and the emotions there, but otherwise I just thought it was a phenomenal ending. And I was feeling just so nostalgic and sentimental in the end, because it really did feel like we were going back through the series, back around to the beginning. And after I finished, I just found myself like wandering around, like thinking like, wow, now I'm done. That's it. I've been reading these for so long and I'm done. Like, what do I do next? And so you do get that sense of loss when you finish a great series. And I did feel that with The Expanse. I thought it was well worth it. And another thing that differed in Leviathan Falls is that, well, as we moved through The Expanse, the sci-fi element kind of started to get more and more and more abstract, as it does, because we don't really have the scientific language to describe what's happening, or probably the mental capacity at all, like humans. And so a lot of stuff was getting really abstract and experimental. I thought James S.A. Corey did a good job of experimenting with different literary devices, and that it did hold together. Characters, I rated a 9 out of 10. And it is a little lower than Tiamat's Wrath because the characters were so spread out again. There was like at least a dozen characters in Leviathan Falls. I think The Expanse is at its best when we have between like 4 and 6 POVs that we can really zoom in on. So I just thought there were too many. I didn't feel all that invested in some of the newer characters. I mean, the older ones, like I've been with for so long, where yeah, I'm invested in them. And I most certainly was invested in the gym chapters. Like, so I was always looking forward to reading those chapters. Just like a bunch of the latter Expanse books, Prose got a 9.5 out of 10. I thought it was great. I just didn't think it was any better than Tiamat's Wrath. And I was just hoping there would be like this little jump up. Though chapter 39, I thought was so good. And I love the ending overall. I thought it was just beautifully done. As I can't say enough as I gush about it more and more. Originality, I rated 9.5 out of 10. I know, and I've been giving like 10 out of 10s on this for a while now. And the thing is, there is a heavy nostalgia element in this book, which I really did love. And there is a new element that's brought in. It's something that is not uncommon to sci-fi. I'm not really going to say what it is. It's kind of like the next step in evolution for humanity, I suppose. You could think about that, but it was well done. Maybe it could have been a little more original. And then this thing is totally coincidental, and it did not impact my originality score, but I'm just gonna mention it. There's a Teresa chapter in which she has her 16th birthday, and Jordan and I have been working on a book together for the last like 4 summers. And we have this chapter where we have one of our female characters on her 16th birthday that is so kind of similar in nature that we've revised so many times that I'm just like, oh no, like, how is it kind of similar to this chapter? I had never read this before, and they certainly didn't read ours. I think maybe it's just such a classic archetype that we drew on the same thing. Anyway, moving on. So world building, yeah, okay, 10 out of 10. I mean, they created this fantastic world in the Expanse, and I can't say anymore. Overall, I rate the Expanse 9.4 out of 10. So definitely a solid ending to the series. So stay tuned, because I actually do have one more Expanse novella to review. So look out for my Sins of Our Fathers review. And also, to keep up with iWizard, please subscribe, hit that notification bell, and if you want to tip your booktubers, please check us out on Patreon. All right, see you next time. Bye.